that's really what I'm objecting to, you see.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it seems to me of tremendous importance to recognise that we can actually, do quite a lot, but we're not going to do anything at all unless we start off by recognising that it is possible to do something.
Yeah.
And what's more, you see, I don't know whether you've seen my autobiography, what's the damn thing called?
Doing it to some purpose.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I mixed it up with the first one, Voyage to a Beginning. But in there, I say the funny way that things seem to happen very often when things are going right, and you get an odd kind of feeling, almost as if fate is trying to show you something. When I was finishing that book on UFOs, Alien Dawn, I kept getting this kind of odd feeling of things all working out right. Almost as if somebody was saying to me, yeah, you're on the right lines, keep going. And weird synchronicities. And whenever I get tired and low, these stop. Whenever I'm feeling optimistic and good, these start up. And when I was finishing that book, there was an odd kind of little synchronicity that used to occur. If I woke up in the middle of the night and looked at the clock beside my bed, which has got figures you can read on it, as often as not, I found it in treble figures. It'd be things like 111, 222, 333, 444. Funnily enough, this morning I woke up, looked at the clock, it's 444. And you suddenly get this odd feeling, that there's something's trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
And I suppose you know that anecdote, which I put into my article on synchronicity in the Encyclopedia of Unsolved Mysteries about it, where I was quoting Jacques Vallee's to talk about synchronicity. Jacques being very interested in UFOs and so on, and saying that he was trying to find out something about a particular cult in San Francisco, not in Los Angeles, and he kept getting little bits of information about this kind of thing, which happened again and again. And I spent the afternoon writing about this. What interested him was a cult called the Cult of Melchizedek. It's an obscure biblical prophet. And what he wanted to do was to find out as much as he could about this biblical prophet Melchizedek. And there's almost nothing about Melchizedek. But anyway, he then began to find odd synchronicities, and one of them was a lady taxi driver who took him to, I think, Los Angeles airport, and he said, could he have a receipt? And she signed the receipt, and when he looked at the signature, it said M. Melchizedek. They thought, oh, that's funny. There must be more Melchizedeks around than you think.
Yeah.
And so, when he got home, he looked it up in the LA phone directory, which is this big. One Melchizedek, his taxi driver.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I finished writing that, and I go out for a walk with my dogs, you see, in the late afternoon. So off I went with the dogs, and when I came back, I went and sat in my chair downstairs, and there was a book which had fallen onto the camp bed, which I hadn't seen before, and it was a book called You Are Sentenced to Life, by someone with a name like Dr. Eustace Chesser or something. Anyway, I open this thing, and the first thing I see across the top of the page is the Cult of Melchizedek. And I thought, my God, this is really synchronicity. It was a letter from the founder of this cult, a lady called Grace Hooper Pettifer, to the author of the book. Now, the book, how it got onto my bed, I don't know. It had obviously fallen from the shelf above it, and because I must have sent it off to be bound. It had been a paperback, and I'd had it bound. But anyway, so I sat down to finish my article, the next day and said, more or less, you're not going to believe this, but... and then said, that Jacques Vallee story was the biggest coincidence, synchronicity, I had ever come across. And now it's as if fate said, okay, I'll top that. And did.
Yeah.
And I've noticed these interesting synchronicities again and again.
Yeah.
And they don't happen if you're like Samuel Beckett, if your attitude is completely negative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one I remember, when I was driving home on a Saturday night from the pub, and I happened to say to Joy, the thing is, we take so much for granted. For example, we now take it for granted that this car will take us home with no problem at all. And, but on the other hand, we don't feel at all grateful that is so. And as I was talking, the car went slower and slower and stopped. And I was very puzzled. I lifted the bonnet and tried it again and again, couldn't get it started. And finally, I said to Joy, well, I don't know, there was a car in the distance, it was a quiet evening, and I went and flagged this car down. There was a young man in there, and I said, if you're going near Goran, I don't suppose you'd give my wife a lift, could you? He said, yes, okay. So he took Joy off. Joy came back and collected the Land Rover. Within about a quarter of an hour she was back again, and we towed the car at the back of the Land Rover, got it home fine. With no real inconvenience. It only took about half an hour longer. And when the garage looked at it, they said it was a fault they'd never ever seen before. And I got, once again, that feeling I was just saying to Joy. It was almost as if fate was trying to say to me, when I said to her, I get this odd feeling that there's some force behind things that only shows its face now and then to convince us that it really exists. And this doesn't happen, you see, if you take the kind of attitude of Derrida. You see, one of the most basic things about the bird's eye view is that a certain optimism is absolutely fundamental. I mean, our most common experience of life is that feeling of suddenly feeling, and getting that sinking feeling inside. And it's extremely difficult, a sort of defeat proneness, to do anything about the defeat proneness. Whereas what Maslow said was that once, in fact, you get yourself into that state of mind where you begin having these bubbling peak experiences, then quite suddenly you suddenly find that they become more and more frequent. See, Maslow was this American psychologist who wrote to me about 1960 and said that he'd stopped studying sick people because they just talked about their sickness. And instead of this, he decided to study healthy people. And as soon as he began to study healthy people, he quickly discovered that they had these peak experiences all the time. And what's more, when he talked to his students about peak experiences, they began describing peak experiences which they'd had in the past and more or less semi-forgotten about. But also, they began having peak experiences all the time as they talked to one another about their peak experiences. So the one certain way of inducing peak experiences is to talk about peak experiences. So that's what I mean by a bird's eye view. We get so completely used to our worm's eye view of things from the moment we open our eyes in the morning that it's extremely difficult to get into a bird's eye state of mind. You see, there are various ways of getting into the bird's eye state of mind. As I say, alcohol will do it, drugs will do it, all kinds of things will do it. The main question is, how can you do it without any kind of help? Because if you can learn to do it without any kind of help, you can do it again and again. You can keep on going back to it and, create the peak experience in yourself. Well, this, in a way, is the basis of my sort of daily effort.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. And what I have to do is to push myself into a kind of state of great optimism. And to push aside this tendency that we all have when things begin to go wrong. Oh my God, what's going to happen now? And I'm pretty convinced it would be interesting to set up a series of experiments and actually getting one group of people who are basically pessimistic and a group who are basically optimistic, and then seeing what the different things that happened to the two different groups.